50 years ago, Kol Nidre in this sanctuary was in most ways just like tonight's sacred assembly. But by Yom Kippur morning, the news was trickling in and everything changed. Rabbi Plaut alav hashalom later recalls, the air was fresh and cool. A reassuring wind blew the morning I walked to the synagogue. But the moment I arrived, I knew something was amiss. Have you heard the news, Rabbi? No, I hadn't. It's war again. They've attacked Israel simultaneously, both north and south, on Yom Kippur no less. Israel was only 25 years young when its fourth war began. Rabbi Plaut addressed the congregation throughout the day's services with a kind of running commentary. You see, he had a phone cord extended right up onto the bima so that he could receive regular updates from a friend at the Israeli consulate. He shared both progress and battle defeats as the war ebbed and flowed. He later recalls the cantor chanted, and his voice filled the hearts of the worshipers. When he came to the prayer, who shall live and who shall die, we thought of our families who were once again on trial. The Yizkor memorial prayers too had special meaning, far beyond the personal. Many people cried bitterly. That is how it started for us. But it didn't end there, in prayers and tears. The Yom Kippur War brought an existential crisis for Israel, and the response of world Jewry was swift and sincere, a swell of support, a rush of courage and commitment. The day after Yom Kippur, 1973, was a Sunday, October 8th. The Holy Blossom Temple Youth Group was tasked with calling the entire congregation for an emergency meeting the very next evening. And our teens were very effective in their calls. The temple bulletin later said of them, with young people like these, we need not fear the future. By Monday evening, this sanctuary was packed all over again, and an emergency campaign was launched. Over the days that followed, the Toronto Jewish community mobilized. There were meetings with government officials, with the Council of Churches, and with the press. The Toronto Board of Rabbis called for solidarity with Israel's grief, insisting that all social events like dances and banquets would be postponed until Hanukkah. And private simchas like weddings and bar mitzvahs were to be tempered. And I know this call was heard because years ago, one congregant told me that his parents canceled his bar mitzvah party and sent all the funds that would have been spent on food and the band to Israel instead. That one parenting decision shaped his Jewish identity well enough to last a lifetime. Fast forward 50 years. Today, many historians, political scientists, and constitutional lawyers say that what Israel is facing now is an existential crisis, the likes of which have not been seen since the Yom Kippur War. Israeli friends of mine who are not alarmists seriously wonder if Israel will survive this internal conflict. Many have left or are leaving because they cannot bear to watch the dismantling of the Israel that they have known and loved and defended. When there is an external threat, Israelis and world Jewry know how to band together. But truth be told, when we look at the arc of Jewish history, we don't have such a great track record when it comes to navigating our way out of internal conflicts. Today's risk is from the inside out. It is not, thank God, a threat to the body of Israel, but to her neshama. This, it seems, is easy to ignore, but no less dangerous. 3,500 years show patterns of extraordinary resilience and resolve when an enemy rises against us. Internal cracks, the clash and conflicts from within, Jewish history warns, ignore them at your own peril. You may have seen in Haaretz an open letter to North American rabbis written by Alon Pincus, former foreign policy advisor and chief of staff to Shimon Peres and Ehud Barak. He pleads that this year's High Holy Day sermons not pretend anything away. He writes, "The Israel you rabbis referred to in previous years is in grave danger. In fact, to a degree, it no longer exists. It is a torturous realization, but you cannot avoid it. North American Jews are being asked to shift the paradigm, to change their mindsets, to dispense with cliches, to be critical on an issue they habitually veer away from, and to look at reality without flinching. And this is a big ask." End quote. Good people, Kol Nidre is about telling the truth. Kol Nidre, this holy night of all holy nights, is for naming hard truths and for resolving to confront them and to correct them. So I will tell you the truth as best I understand it, and it pains me to say so, in this sacred place at this sacred hour. Simply put, Israel is in trouble. One of the many things I admire about Canadian Jewry is its Zionism. Right, left, and center, there is a deep love and respect for Israel here. There is an innate sense of pride in Israel and a built-in trust that Israelis will always find a way. But I fear that this great pride has blinded many of us to the fact that Israel is in real trouble now. We Canadian Jews have looked on and worried, war after war, intifada after intifada, sealed rooms and sirens, BDS movements, and unfair treatment in the halls of the UN. Thank God Israel has survived them all. We have watched and worried from a safe distance, and we have been lulled into believing that Israel can survive anything, that Israelis are superheroes who can outmaneuver missiles with Iron Dome, outsmart enemies with spy networks of intelligence, and outlive disproportionate international criticisms with their heads held high. But Israelis are not superhuman. They are very human. And the state of Israel is not immune to the waves of extremism and totalitarianism which threaten many free countries of the world today. In many ways, the Jewish state is entirely unique. But in this way, the state of Israel is like all the nations of the world. We are not immune. Yes, to be a Zionist means to defend the Jewish people's right to self-determination in our ancestral homeland. But to be a Zionist does not mean to be blind to Israel's vulnerabilities, nor to be so loyal that we are afraid to admit out loud that Israel has weaknesses. To be a loving and loyal Zionist today, at this blessed moment of Jewish history, means setting down that one-note script of Hasbara. It means being willing to see and to say that Israel is in trouble, that we are in trouble. 75 years in, and we are almost entirely a generation that cannot imagine a world without an Israel that is Jewish and democratic. But what was so hard-earned could easily slip away, one law at a time. If you think I am exaggerating, forgive me, but then you have not been paying attention. For 38 weeks straight, Israelis have been peacefully taking to the streets of her cities every Saturday night by the hundreds of thousands. They began by protesting many different things. The signs and slogans, t-shirts and banners were a cacophony of messages. But in time, they united under one flag, the flag of Israel, right and left, young and old, religious and secular, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi, Ethiopian, off-duty IDF soldiers and veterans, city folk and country folk alike, new immigrants and those whose families have lived in the land of Israel since long before the state was ever established. They have all united in one chant, Demokratia. I've wondered why, over these many weeks, why the Canadian Jewish community isn't yet mobilized. Where is the outcry? How do we explain the passive response from most corners of our very strong and very diverse Jewish community? How do you understand these sins of omission? I hope to God it isn't because we only know how to respond when Jewish blood is shed, God forbid. On this day of self-reflection, consider these three possibilities, three possible reasons for our sluggish response. 1, Canadian Zionists are so well practiced in defending Israel and defending Israel's government that it's a hard habit to break. No one in this congregation would tolerate sending women to the back of the bus. I know that's true. No one in this congregation would tolerate a government or a rabbinate telling LGBTQ+ people whom to love or denying them their hard-won legal rights. No one in this congregation would stand for government-sanctioned discrimination against minority groups amongst its citizenry. We would not tolerate these things here. So why do we tolerate them in the Jewish state? A second possibility, Canadian Zionists are also well practiced in a special kind of humility, which is inflected with Jewish guilt honed over centuries. We say, I am not a citizen of Israel. I do not send my children off to the army, so who am I to speak out? But Israel is not only for Israelis. By design, from its earliest ideological beginnings, this Jewish state was always intended to be for the sake of the Jewish people everywhere. We do not have a vote, but we do have a voice, and Israelis are begging us to use it. I remember former director of the Israel Religious Action Center, Anat Hoffman, once came to address us here at Holy Blossom Temple, and she said, "You North American Jews, you are a sleeping giant. Wake up." So if you care about the status of your own conversion to Judaism, if you want to ensure that the Jewish state continues to recognize the conversions of our children and grandchildren, speak up. A third hard truth that may be standing in our way of responsible Zionism today. I hate to say it, it's a kind of imposter syndrome. There is among even some of the most committed Reform and conservative Jews an insecurity complex. For reasons I do not understand, there is a sense that Orthodox Jews are somehow more Jewish. There is no such thing. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. Reform and conservative, modern Orthodox and secular Jews are as Jewish as anyone who chooses to wear a black hat. The slogan of the Israeli Reform movement has been for years now, there is more than one way to be Jewish. So if you drove to Holy Blossom Temple tonight, why wouldn't you stand up for the current debate over public transportation in Israel on Shabbat and on holy days? If you have stood at the graveside of a dear one where husbands and wives, brothers and sisters huddle together to support one another, why wouldn't you oppose those who call for imposing separation of men and women at Jewish cemeteries in Israel? If you have gone to the beach with your own family, why wouldn't you care about the proposal for separation of men and women at Israel's national parks? If Orthodox congregations, schools, and rabbis of Israel receive government funding, why are we resigned to the fact that still most of our sister congregations, Reform and conservative schools, and rabbis in Israel receive none? If you value the lives of the IDF soldiers, why do you stand still before the proposal that one who chooses to study in yeshiva instead of serving in the army should be given all the same rights and benefits as a soldier? There are 225 far-reaching proposals on the table today. If even a fraction of them were to pass, the very character of Israel would change. The very nature of the Jewish state would become unrecognizable and much harder to defend. To ignore Israel's internal struggle is hurtful to Israelis. To deny it is insult to injury. We can debate tactics, to be sure. We can debate how to most effectively express our concerns. But whether or not to be concerned, that is clear. And I am not talking about partisan politics here. I am a Zionist, and I am a rabbi, talking to my congregation about Jewish values, about Jewish peoplehood, and the Jewish future. This must be a conversation about values which transcend politics. This is not about right and left. Set that paradigm aside for another day, for another matter. Now, some people I know and trust do believe that there is a need for a corrective to the power that the Supreme Court of Israel currently holds. And legal experts must have that conversation. But this is not that. What I'm talking about now is a power grab to the extreme. This is a government's refusal to listen to its own people. This is a coalition's outright rejection of any compromise. And this is very dangerous. Attempts for negotiation were flatly denied. This government is going for broke. It is not only about judicial reforms, it is about redefining and rewiring the Jewish state altogether. The millions of Israeli demonstrators are defending the very identity of Israel. They are fighting to maintain the open-minded and open-hearted articulation of their Zionist dream. Every morning we pray, Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir v'nizkeh chulanu mehera la'oro. May a new light shine upon Zion, and let us all soon be worthy of its light. How do we show ourselves to be deserving of Israel's light? How do we earn it? How do we work for it from here? I'll name 6 concrete ways quickly. 1, as I said at the very beginning of this crisis, reach out to your Israeli friends and relatives and colleagues. They need our encouragement. They are tired. And while many are in it for the long haul, they need to know that they are not alone. The simplest email or phone call makes all the difference. 2, study up. Holy Blossom's Israel Engagement Committee has planned an excellent lineup for this fall, including member of Knesset, Reform Rabbi Gilad Kariv, October 3rd, and Orly Erez Lachovsky, director of the Israel Religious Action Center, which is the legal and advocacy arm of the Reform movement in Israel. She will be with us in person October 18th. We are blessed to have the chance to learn from these 2 great leading lights. I suggest you read the Times of Israel. I suggest you listen to podcasts from thought leaders at the Hartman Institute. Our religious school students have a new Israel curriculum this year. So must we. 3, write. Reinforce the message that diaspora Jewry objects to the bigotry, sexism, racism, and homophobia expressed by some of Israel's current leadership. By writing to them directly, you can do that. The link with email addresses and some sample letters are provided on our Lean Into Israel page on our website. So tell them, what is your vision for the state of Israel? Tell them that you stand for the values articulated by our founding fathers in Israel's Declaration of Independence. One of my final acts as president of the Toronto Board of Rabbis this spring was to send Netanyahu the statement of the Toronto Board of Rabbis, the one that we signed just before Pesach. I hope you've read it. I hope you know what local rabbis believe in. 4, you're about to hear about another emergency campaign 50 years later, this time for the Israel Reform Movement and for the Israel Religious Action Center. Please be generous. We can be extremely proud of how our sister congregations and Reform Jewish leadership in Israel have been on the front lines of this movement from the very beginning. 5, plan your next trip to Israel. Bring your children, bring your grandchildren. 50 years ago, a Canadian Zionist named Leonard Cohen packed his guitar and went to lift the spirits of the Israeli soldiers stationed in the Sinai, and they loved him for it, and they never forgot him for it. Just your presence will speak volumes. And finally, pray. Use this day of Yom Kippur, use this 50th anniversary to reflect on your own relationship with Israel. Tomorrow's martyrology service will include reflections by one dear congregant who is a veteran of the Yom Kippur War. Her name is Tali Weiss. And something new this year, Holy Blossom is hosting for the very first time a Na'ila service led by Israelis for Israelis living in Toronto. Help to welcome all 200 of them. They will be joining us for Havdalah, for sweet wine and honey cake under the stars tomorrow night on the Bathurst Street Plaza. In his own day, the biblical prophet Isaiah pledged, "Lema'an Sion lo echasheh, ulema'an Yerushalayim lo eshkot." For Zion's sake, I will not stay silent, and for the sake of Jerusalem, I will not keep still until she emerges resplendent in righteousness and justice. So where can our hope be found? I do believe in Israelis. With our support, they will find their way. I can't help it, but I believe, ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema. I believe with a perfect faith in the extraordinary spirit of the people of Israel. I witnessed that faith at work at the few demonstrations I was lucky enough to attend in Israel this spring and this summer. They were led by the young and the hopeful. And every week's demonstration ends the very same way. The drums stop. The chants in the megaphones stop. Everyone is still, and angry voices melt into sweet song. Desperation is replaced with the hope when they sing Hatikva. And then they go home again and start all over again. One other song has become a kind of anthem for this moment. Ehud Manor wrote this poem as a tribute to his own brother Yehuda, who fell in the 1968 War of Attrition. And it was set to music by Karine Alal in 1982 in the midst of what